Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon and welcome to the 2019 National Partners Luncheon. We're really thrilled that you are here and have joined us. If I could interrupt you for just a moment and ask you if you would please stand and join with me in the signing of Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Please be seated. We're really happy that you are here. This is an opportunity for those of us at the Association of the United States Army simply to say thank you. And to those industries and businesses who have been so supportive of soldiers, families, veterans, retirees, and this association over so many years. We're truly thankful that you have joined us. A little bit later, we'll have the opportunity to hear directly from the Honorable Robert Wilkie, the Secretary of Veterans Affairs. Secretary Wilkie has joined us. Thank you, sir, for joining us here today. The 40th Chief of Staff of the United States Army, General Jim McConnell. If you did not have the opportunity to hear General McConnell yesterday at the Eisenhower lunch, you missed something. And I would encourage you to go to the AUSA website, ausa.org, where it's archived. It is worth listening to what our Chief of Staff has laid out as his vision for the Army as we move ahead. It really is very, very valuable. So for all others, for General and Flag Officers, particularly for our international partners who are here, for the Senior Executive Service members, Program Executive Officers, Program and Project Managers, thank you all. In our association, there are over 560 national partners, huge. And frankly, we cannot do what this association does in support of the Army without you, and we're very, very thankful for your continued support. Absolutely. Many of you over the past couple of days have seen many of the opportunities for the Army and industry to get together and share experiences, ideas, and ways to collaborate moving ahead. The Army's XX search, which has been ongoing for a couple of years, highlights new technologies and concepts, and awards will be presented at the end of this year's annual meeting for XTech 2.0 and the XTech Search 3.0 semifinalists. The XTech Search 2.0 winner will receive $250,000, not bad. In places 2 through 12, $10,000 each. So that effort continues, and it's a good way to inspire and motivate innovative developments in industries and capabilities that support the Army. We've been very pleased to once again host the Veterans Hiring Pavilion, Warriors to the Workforce, that brings together major companies that provide employment opportunities for transitioning soldiers and veterans. Attending members have the opportunity to talk with employers, submit their qualifications, participate in one-on-one interviews. That and many more have made this a great 2019 annual meeting. Over the past few days, hopefully, as I've experienced, I hope you have experienced, reigniting partnerships, friendships across the Army. It's been a wonderful meeting. We'll cap it off tonight with the presentation of the General George C. Marshall Medal, the General Martin Dempsey, who many of you know, the Army's 37th Chief of Staff and the 18th Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. So with that, please enjoy your lunch, and we'll resume the program in just a few moments. Thank you.
Sir. 30 years ago, in 1989, the Association of the United States Army created an award for distinguished service from the defense industry. The award is named in honor of the first recipient, the Honorable John W. Dixon, a former Defense Department Deputy Controller who over 20 years transformed a small, unprofitable subsidiary of LTD Incorporated into E-Systems, an enterprise producing electronic components, communications, and data systems for the U.S. military that had amassed more than $1 billion in revenue and a backlog of $1.6 billion at the time of his retirement in 1987. Mr. Dixon continued to serve as the E-Systems Chairman Emeritus until his death in 1989. Over the past 3 decades, some of the biggest names in the defense industry have received the Dixon Award, including Norm Augustine of Lockheed Martin, Bill Swanson of Raytheon, Linda Hudson of BAE Systems, Wes Bush of Northrop Grumman, James Miller of General Dynamics, and last year's recipient, Roger Crumb, Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of Leidos. This year's recipient is equally noteworthy and would relate very well with Mr. Dixon, I think. Will General Ham and Mr. Peter Martin of Ameripac please join me on stage? For the past 30 years, Peter Martin has dedicated his professional and personal life to protecting America's troops and their equipment. Mr. Martin founded Ameripac in 1989 in Robbinsville, New Jersey. He built the company around the philosophy to protect them when they are forward and take care of them on return. The company provides warfighters with the best protection for their equipment, with airtight, watertight, and crush-proof containers to withstand harsh theater environments to help ensure that equipment works when needed. Ameripac is also dedicated to supporting organizations that take care of our warriors and their families. Ameripac employees are constantly reminded of how fortunate they are to operate in a free country protected by the valiant efforts of the men and women who serve in the armed forces. Under his leadership, the company regularly gives back to the military community, donating a portion of every product sold to the Special Operations Warriors Foundation. They also support the Association of the United States Army, the National Guard Association of the United States, the Wounded Warrior Project, the Vietnam Veterans Foundation, the Fisher House Foundation, and many others. In recognition of his dedicated philanthropic support for the men and women of our armed forces and their families, we proudly present the John W. Dixon Award to Mr. Peter Martin of Ameripac.
You have to bear with me while I get my bearing. Yeah, this is really special. I'd like to say good afternoon to General Hand, Mr. Wilkie, and General Cardinal, and Snake Stress, General McPherson, and General Swan, and their wonderful team for the incredible work. I'm indebted to Colonel Sam Fianco and Kip Loach and Monmouth USA chapter for this nomination. Thank you to the Association of the United States Army for this honor. When I look back at the leaders in the industry that have received this award, I'm in awe that Ameripac could be in this company. As individuals like John W. Dixon and those who have already received the award, the achievement is not just mine. While I am the CEO at Ameripac, and Ameripac CEO means Chief
Our proudest accomplishment is the support for the American soldier and their families. I feel privileged to have led our team in providing great products and generosity in our military. I would like to thank those two tables over there and a lot of my other friends that are here that made the trip to honor this award. Now, I hope they're still my friends after I get done because they've heard my jokes 1,000 times. So it is what it is. You had to show up anyway. Okay. Finally, I'd like to thank my wife, Lanny, and my son, Peter. Peter is Captain America Jr., okay? So we're expecting him to take over after they kind of phase out a little bit. They are the foundation of our family, and they allow me to do what I do. We've got great patience, believe me, and I would not be here without them. Gratitude is one of my core values. At a very young age, my parents taught me the importance of being grateful and channeling that gratitude into giving back to the community. My mom always wanted us to move to the United States. We were born in Canada for better opportunities. For my sister, Suzanne, and my brother Eric and myself. Part of that was, though, I failed the 11th grade at Catholic school in Canada. Now, who does that? So she says to me, I'm not only embarrassed, I think we have to go to States, we need a new start. So that's why I'm here and doing what we're doing. My dad served in World War II in the Canadian Navy as a signalman. And they were transporting to Londonderry. They were guarding the ship going over, and he got shot. His boat got shot by a German U-boat torpedo. Dad went down with, and he didn't tell the story until he was 8 years old. Dad went down with 11 of them on a raft, all his crewmates. Within 10 minutes, there were 3 left. They're in the North Atlantic, in a raft. The mesh comes out, they hook themselves in, they die of exposure. So a U.S. submarine comes and saves the last 3 that are on the raft. My dad, his best friend from his hometown, and his other best friend. One of them, they're all 19. So they come off, one comes off, Dad comes off second. And the last thing he sees is his best friend from his hometown. The squall comes up, the raft goes up, salt goes down, salt comes up, raft goes under. They never found any of the other 9. So, my family's so grateful to the U.S. Armed Forces. So let me go on here. I've never forgotten that. I'm so grateful. Dad's commitment to his country, his family, his community inspires me. That's why I've always prioritized America's ability to support our communities. And you think of no better community to give back to than our servicemen, women and families. Truly, I'm in awe of the sacrifices made by our military and families. Every opportunity and every freedom in our lives is a direct result of their sacrifices. Many of you know that at Ameripac, well, Paul Tremont and Kevin Harrell tested, John White, we love to have a good time. But every time we have a good time, around the beer and laughter, we always remember that the freedom that we enjoy and the happiness in our lives are gifts bestowed upon us by the sacrifice of the military and their families. As business leaders, we have a choice about how we use these gifts. These gifts come with responsibility. As business leaders in the defense industry, we have a responsibility to use our freedom for the selfless service of those who defend it. We have an undeniable obligation to support those protecting us. We all have to do our part. I have come to accept that part will not include me becoming a GI, obviously. Lead soldiers in the battle. With that realization, I looked other ways to play my part and support our armed forces. I've always believed that if we can make our soldiers' lives just a fraction easier, then we're on the right path. At AmeriPac, we do this in two ways. First way is by building durable functional cases to protect the equipment and technology that you guys developed, so that we make sure that when it is there, it works. We take pride in our products and our contribution to the fight. The second way is by supporting our warriors when they return home. Our responsibility to these men and women does not stop at the front lines. AmeriPac strives to maintain a connection to those in uniform, especially when they return. I know I'm preaching to the choir to those in uniform. I know that I'm preaching to the choir, but our men and women deserve to feel secure, useful, and appreciated every time they return home. Working with organizations such as AUSA, Fisher House, TAPS, Special Operation Warrior Foundation, Wounded Warrior Project, we do that to support, AmeriPac does that to support our warriors. The AmeriPac way and our mission and responsibility is to protect them when forward and to take care of them on return. I'm honored to be the first small business to receive this award at AmeriPac, which happens to be our 30th year, and this is the 30th year of the John W. Dixon Award for our contributions. The words of President Theodore Roosevelt kind of capture this sentiment. He said, "Do what you can with what you have, where you are." This is ingrained in our DNA at AmeriPac. We will never have the biggest profits or the largest staff, but we will always put our warriors and philanthropy first. It is our responsibility. Thank you again to the Association of the United States Army for this humbling award, and thanks to everyone in attendance today. Your compassion, generosity, and commitment to service is deeply touching. We are so blessed to live in the greatest country in the world. Keep supporting the warriors of this nation and their families, and you can always count on AmeriPac to do the same. But before General Mann gives me the hook, I have to ask how many people out here, how many folks are either Irish or Irish descent? Oh, great. Since I'm the Chief Entertainment Officer, I gotta tell my Irish joke. So if you hear any groans from those two tables that were invited by me, don't listen to them. All right, so here's how it goes. So Patty buys a puppy, and the puppy's sick. So he goes to Father O'Malley and says, "Father, is there a chance you could say a prayer for your poor puppy at Sunday Mass?" Father O'Malley looks at him and says, "Are you crazy, Patty? We're a house of worship. You don't pray for pets." So Patty says, "Well, Father, what if I get out of the Protestant church and I offer him $500 to say a prayer for your poor puppy?" Father O'Malley's eyes open wide. He looks straight at Patty and he goes, "Holy Jesus, Patty, you didn't tell me your puppy was Catholic."
Thank you very much, Pete. You might, there's a to introduce our keynote speaker for today's luncheon, the Honorable Robert Wilkie, the 10th Secretary of Veterans Affairs. Many of you know him. He's a friend of the Army, he's a friend of soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marine, Coast Guardmen, their families, he's a friend of business. Before going to the VA, he was the Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness, and in that job served as the Principal Advisor to the Secretary of Defense on Total Force Management. And he served with Secretary Mattis, and he served as Assistant Secretary of Defense with both Secretary Rumsfeld and Secretary Gates. That's where I first had the opportunity to meet then Secretary Wilkie as he was Assistant Secretary of Defense for Legislative Affairs. He's been Special Assistant to the President for National Security Affairs, Senior Director of the National Security Council. He is today, a Colonel in the United States Air Force Reserve. He previously served in the Navy Reserve with the Joint Forces Intelligence Command, Naval Special Warfare Group 2, and with the Office of Naval Intelligence. Though he has worn the cloth of the Air Force and the cloth of the Navy, I gotta tell you, underneath that man beats the heart of a soldier. He is the son of a soldier. And those of you who know him, he grew up in Fort Bragg, North Carolina. It's a pretty good upbringing. That gives one strength and character to continue on and persevere. And I suspect that it was in following the model of his father, following all those great paratroopers of the 82nd Airborne Division and the 18th Airborne Corps that was then planted in Secretary Wilkie the necessity, the call to serve the nation, which he has done admirably for many, many years. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Secretary of Veterans Affairs, the Honorable Robert Wilkie.
Well, thank you, General Ham. I'm going to validate what General Ham said. I was privileged to grow up at Fort Sill and Fort Bragg. My military career took me in an opposite direction. I am the first Wilkie since the War with Mexico who is not an artillery officer, and I beg your indulgence. But it was those traditions and that culture of the United States Army that I still know best and revere the most, and it is always an honor for me to be here with you. I'm going to violate the first rule of public speaking by recognizing just a few people in an audience. I know a lot of folks, and churches said never do that because you make somebody mad, so I will take that chance. My friend General McConnell, it is an honor as always for me to be with him, and it is a great blessing that you are leading the Army of the United States. General Laura Richardson and I have shared a lot of combat in the most dangerous place on this planet, Capitol Hill. So it's good to see you too, General. And my old friend, Pat Hipson, who is in her last year as a member of the Board of AUSA, and she has done so much as a trailblazer and as a supporter of soldiers everywhere. It's good to see you, man. Well, I'm now going to talk about somebody who's not here, General Jim Linder, who just retired after decades of exceptional service, leading special warriors around the world. He is partially responsible for getting me out of football purgatory. Now, you know, in the South, football is religion. And when I say football purgatory, I attended Great Forest University. Our mascot is a Baptist preacher. Our football dorm is named after Arnold Palmer. But my son followed General Linder's advice, and he became an engineering student at Clemson University. The champions, the people who sent Saban back to his Tuscaloosa home 2 of the last 3 years. I had an opportunity to talk to the Clemson team and the Corps of Cadets last year, and I told them with a straight face that I was part of an organization that contributed to all of the great records at Clemson's Memorial Stadium. The most points scored by Clemson in the first one, the most points scored by Clemson at halftime. It was 87 points that they put on the board. And you know, Clemson has a tradition. They have that wonderful tiger that Alabama has seen so much of. And he does push-ups to match the number of points on the board. Folks, it was 73-0 in the third quarter on a hot South Carolina afternoon, and the tiger disappeared. And all of a sudden, the ambulance comes out of the Clemson tunnel. The tiger is straight out. The little tiger hat is off. His face is red as a Coke can. At the end of the day, Coach Earl had a press conference, and he was asked a profound question, as only a member of the Fifth Estate can ask it. He said, Coach, is there anything you can say about today's game? I said, yeah, we killed that damn tiger. It is great to be here, and I thank you so much. And I'm going to start by talking about something that General Ham mentioned. I was privileged to grow up in the company of heroes. Warriors who walked sideways because of the decorations that they wore on their chests. And warriors who were asked more than once to go to Southeast Asia. Now, we'll talk about them a little later. But I've been spending a lot of time celebrating the 100th anniversary of the end of the Great War, the explosion of the United States of America onto the world stage, conflict that still impacts us today. And it was 101 years ago yesterday that a scratch farmer from Powell, Tennessee, by way of Buncombe County, North Carolina, found himself deep inside German lines in the Meuse Argonne. He was a corporal in the 82nd Infantry Division, and he started receiving heavy German fire. But the Germans had to show their heads to get to him, and he started picking them off one by one. He later wrote, every time I saw one, I took him out. After he killed a dozen or so German soldiers, the Germans in the sector surrendered their superior force. 90 of them marched back with 3 soldiers of the All-American Division. And that detachment later picked up another 132 German prisoners. When he arrived, the assistant division commander of the 1st Infantry Division told him, I hear you captured the whole damn German army. He said, no, sir. I only got 132. That man received the hero's welcome. When he returned home, he was immediately sought out by advertisers, Hollywood, and others who wanted his endorsement. But he shunned them, and he declined every offer in the way only a man from East Tennessee could. He said, my uniform ain't the same. He later agreed to have his story told in 1940 by Hollywood, and he signed off on Gary Cooper playing him in the movie, just as another global conflict was brewing. His condition was that the profits for the 1940 Best Picture of the Year would go 2 places: to a Bible school in East Tennessee and to a Soldiers Relief Fund for soldiers from Tennessee that served in the United States. He said something else that was more important. When some started to question the wisdom of fighting both the Great War and now that America at that time was on the verge of fighting another global conflict, he said the thing that these so-called experts forget is that liberty and freedom and democracy are so very precious that you don't fight to win them once and then stop. Liberty and freedom and democracy are prizes awarded only to those peoples who fight to win them and keep fighting forever to hold on to them. His experience, Alvin Seabook, on the battlefields of Europe was unique, yet he was only one of 41 million Americans who had taken up arms since the first shots were fired at Lexington Green of April of 1775. Those Americans knew that York was right when he said that the fight would never end for these principles that we all hold so dear. There were others with York at that time, a nearsighted farmer from Jackson County, Missouri, who lied and cheated to get into the field artillery because he could not bear the thought of his friends and neighbors going to war and he not being there to support. He had 2 horses shot from under him, and he would go on to be one of the greatest presidents in our history, Harry Truman. My great-grandfather was there, a small-town lawyer from the Mississippi Delta who had a part-time teaching job at Ole Miss when he arrived at Camp Gordon, Georgia, to join up with the Army assembly there. On another part of that cantonment was my wife's grandfather, a 17-year-old from southeastern North Carolina who had never ventured much beyond 2 or 3 counties in the Carolinas, but before he was 18, he was marching up the Champs-Élysées into the hell of the Meuse-Argonne. There were other stories as well. But as a child, I learned firsthand that the price of freedom is not free, as we all know, but that the recognition of those who carry the burden can sometimes be fleeting. As General Ham mentioned, my father went to Vietnam 3 times. He was a big man for his day, 6'2", 240. Today, that's not even a quarterback. But in 1970, that's a big man. He was so grievously wounded in the invasion of Cambodia that he spent a year at Tripler before returning to us wearing half of what he did when he left. And the only thing that kept him going, other than his family, was this wonderful, wonderful United States Army and the great graces of General Creighton Abrams, who overruled the medical board and said, no, this officer will be allowed time to recover. And he did, and he returned to Fort Bragg. But he returned to America that is very different from the one that we see today. My father, a senior officer in the All-American Division, was not allowed to wear his uniform off post because of the times. And ladies and gentlemen, this was not Cambridge, Massachusetts, or Berkeley, California. This was southeastern North Carolina, the heart of Richard Nixon country. And there were other things that I witnessed during those times. In elementary school and kindergarten, there was always a chance that when a classmate was called to the principal's office, that child was not going to a doctor's appointment, that there was bad news from Southeast Asia. That happened one day in April of 1975. President Ford had ordered the evacuation of all the orphanages in the Saigon era before the North Vietnamese Army entered that city. He called it Operation Baby Lift. One of the folks who volunteered for that assignment was Master Sergeant, Medic, United States Air Force, named Denning Cicero Johnson from Harnett County, North Carolina. On April 4th, his C-5 lifted off from Tan Son Nhut Air Base and never made it to the other end of the runway. 138 lost their lives that day, mostly Vietnamese children. But there were 11 airmen on that plane who did not return. On April 4th of this year, I escorted my classmate, Denise Johnson, to Panel 1W of the Vietnam Memorial, 44 years after her father lost his life, and watched her touch his name, one of the last 4 on that wall. All of this is a history lesson into why the Department of Veterans Affairs exists. It exists because during the most pestilential of conflicts, the President of the United States said, in the greatest of speeches ever delivered by a president, the second inauguration of Abraham Lincoln, that it is our duty to care for all who have borne the battle and for his widow and orphan. This nation has corrected many of the mistakes that took place in the 1970s, and support for our veterans is both high and it is bipartisan. I gave a speech last week at the Nixon Library and said President Nixon would be amazed that even Hollywood stands up for veterans. That's how far we have come. But in our efforts to make sure that we live up to Abraham Lincoln's vision, it is our duty to provide all of those who return and who have served with a welcoming family, a modern 21st century healthcare administration. And I often fall back on my own father's experience. When he retired, he carried around with him an 800-page paper record. It was the only record of his service that began being built when he was in ROTC a couple of months before John Kennedy was elected. We now have, thanks to General McConville, a partnership with the United States Army so that when that young soldier enters the military entrance processing station, we have an electronic record that will be available to him, to the VA, that everyone can see, and we will no longer face the possibility that those who have served will have lost the record of their sacrifice. I will also say, thanks to our partnership with the Department of Defense, that VA finally has a modern 21st century healthcare supply chain. Thanks to the good graces of the Department of the Army and to General Mattis, I signed a memorandum of understanding that makes VA now part of the Defense Logistics Agency, so no longer will VA doctors in the middle of an operation have to run across the parking lot to a civilian hospital to get the material that they should have had when the operation began. And I thank the Army for everything it has done on that score as well. So we have also come off the most transformative legislation since the GI Bill, the Mission Act. Now, only the Congress would come up with an acronym like MISSION. It stands for Something Integrated Healthcare Networks. I just refer to it as reform. What the Mission Act does is it says that soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines will no longer have to drive hundreds of miles to get to a VA facility. They have the opportunity to go into the private sector when their needs demand it, and we will support them in that endeavor. The other thing that we do is that finally, our veterans are put on the same playing field as their neighbors. No longer do they have to suffer the weight and the anxiety in an emergency room. We now tell America's 20 million veterans, you have access to urgent care. And that is a long time coming. I also want to take a moment and address something that I think many of you have heard about, and that is the issue of privatization of the Department of Veterans Affairs. I approach that in a very clinical, almost Trumpian way. I presented to the Congress the largest budget in the history of our department, $220 billion, calling for 400,000 employees spread across 170 hospitals and 1,200 clinics. Only in Washington, D.C. would that be evidence that we are trying to privatize what is a veteran's right. So we are continuing to make sure that your department is there for you when you need it. I will close with what I think is our most pressing matter. And since General Hickerson knows I tend to refer most of my stories either back to the Roman Empire or to 19th century America, I'm going to do it this time. I want you to go back to March of 1893. A major general from the Union Army was about to depart the White House and return home to Indiana. His name was Benjamin Harrison. Now, he's not known for much other than being in between two non-successive terms of Grover Cleveland. But General Harrison had seen enough of the carnage on the battlefields of the eastern United States to have a special place in his heart for those who had borne the battle in that terrible war. And he ordered the United States Army to begin to collect statistics on the numbers of soldiers who take their lives every year. The United States Army began collecting statistics on veteran suicide in 1893. And for the first time, we are finally having a national conversation about soldiers' suicide. We are finally having that national conversation that does not just look at the last tragic act in a soldier's life, but looks at the continuum of issues that might lead to that tragic act: mental health, addiction, and homelessness. We don't want another president of the United States to begin, as Benjamin Harrison did, to compile those awful statistics. 20 a day. 20 a day, that's been a steady number since the 19th century. Of those 20, a few are on active duty. Most of them are from my father's era in Vietnam. But 14 of those 20 we have no contact with. I convened yesterday for the first time the first all-government panel to finally deal with soldiers' suicide, bringing together HHS, Indian Health, the Department of Defense, and HUD, and the National Institutes of Health, to come up with a holistic, medical, social answer to the problem that has confounded us now for well over 100 years. It is our number one clinical priority, and I thank the United States Army for everything it is doing to help those warriors who probably need more help than anyone. So, the goal there is to have all of us working together to do what Alvin York said: protect liberty and freedom, but also those who have had the incommunicable experience of war. It is also needed because we can never repeat what I saw as a child. We must be the welcoming, the homecoming force that our warriors deserve. They went to serve their country, and that was never meant to be the end of what they experienced. They entered a community that is unlike any. So every time you look to protect our warriors in the field or hire them or help fund pro-veterans causes like the Fisher House, you are doing more than helping these deserving young people. You are setting an example for this country and reminding everyone that we have our veterans to thank. It's not the pundit, it's not the professor, it is not the protester. It is those young people who have never shied away from the call of duty. So when Sergeant York passed away in 1964, Lyndon Johnson sent the ultimate Army representative to his funeral, the greatest of airborne warriors, Matthew Bunker Ridgway. Ridgway was there. And I often think of General Ridgway on the evening of D-Day. As many of you know, he had led the All-American Division to victory in North Africa and Sicily and was tasked by General Eisenhower with planning the airborne assault on Hitler's Fortress Europe, the All-American Division, the Screaming Eagles, and the British 1st Airborne. And the night before, he couldn't sleep. He was so restless that he fell out of his cot. And he reached for the Old Testament and he grabbed down the book of Joshua and turned to that promise that Joshua received on the evening of the Battle of Jericho. I shall not fail thee nor forsake thee. In 1986, General Ridgway was given the Presidential Medal of Freedom by Ronald Reagan, and Reagan said, "Heroes come when they are needed, and great men step forward when courage seems in short supply." So that is what AUSA is about. That is what the Department of Affairs is about. It is about not failing or forsaking those who have borne the battle. And it is about never failing or forsaking those great men and women who have stepped forward during all of those times when courage seems in short supply. So I thank AUSA for everything that you do. I thank you all for supporting the men and the women of our armed forces. I thank you for bringing me back to a happier time when I watched the artillery half section roll across the old post quadrangle at Fort Sill and the mass jumps of the 82nd Airborne Division over the Normandy and Sicily drop zones. Thank you for everything you do for America, and God bless you.
Well, thank you so much, Secretary Wilkie. Certainly for your comments, your thoughtful comments, your inspiring words today, but more so, frankly, thanks for your decades of service, your commitment to help this nation be stronger. And those of us at the Association of the United States Army, all assembled here this afternoon, are thankful that our nation has leaders such as yourself who stepped forward in tough times to help make us all better. Thank you, sir. Thank you very, very much. Okay, we're going into the final stretch of the AUSA annual meeting. General McChristian has informed me we have 2 bits of breaking news to report. The Association of the United States Army has been on a pretty steady increase in the overall membership, and today our membership crested 162,000. That's 100,000 more than we were a few years ago. And also today, all those who have joined, we are now well over 32,000 people who have attended this annual meeting. That's 1,000 plus more than last year, a big, big number. Thank you all very, very much. We deeply appreciate it. So with that concludes our 2019 National Partner Luncheon. Thank you all for your sustained support. We look forward to seeing you the rest of the afternoon, this evening at the Marshall Dinner, and be back here 1 year from now for the 2020 annual meeting. Thank you very, very much.